Okay, so carbon dioxide and climate. That's the name of my presentation here. So the CO2 Coalition actually was already described as it was established in 2015 for the purpose of educating thought leaders, policymakers, and the public about the important contribution made by carbon dioxide to our lives and the economy. The coalition seeks to engage in an informed and dispassionate discussion of climate change, humans' role in the climate system, the limitations of climate models, and the consequences of mandated reductions in CO2 emissions. So these are some of the members. There's 130 members, and 70% of them have PhDs. They're some of the top scientists like MIT and Princeton, but most of them are retired. And a big reason for that is that when they weren't retired, they were either working on something besides climate, or they were not getting funding for climate, because if you were not swimming with the fish, then you didn't get it. But so Patrick Moore is a co-founder and 15-year leader of Greenpeace. Richard Lindzen is such a serious scientist, they actually have Getty images of him. Like, he's been around a long time. He's done a lot of things at MIT. And Will Happer, he was actually selected by the Trump administration, not having anything to do with climate, but he is. They had him looking at the electrical grid in the U.S. to determine if there was sunspots or something that would cause the electrical grid to go down. I don't know if you remember back when there was crazy sunspots and the entire Quebec electrical grid went down. Well, if there was a nuclear war, nuclear bombs create crazy electromagnetic radiation, and that could cause the entire electrical grid in the U.S. to go down. So he worked on that. So here is the basics of life on Earth. You know, plants absorb carbon dioxide, they grow. Aerobic organisms breathe in oxygen, exhale carbon dioxide. That's like us. We're an aerobic organism. We eat food, drink liquids, and we pee and poop. Plants absorb carbon dioxide and water. They release oxygen and grow. We primarily use oxygen for energy. Plants use carbon dioxide as a raw material to grow. All the carbon dioxide absorbed by a plant is used to create plant biomass. Carbon dioxide is as important for life as water and oxygen. So, life on Earth. So the atmosphere of Mars and Venus is 95% carbon dioxide. And in the solar system, the Earth is between those two planets. So very likely, before life on Earth, Earth's atmosphere was likely similar to Mars and Venus, mostly carbon dioxide. Today on Earth, it is a trace gas. All oxygen on Earth was created by plants. Significant levels of oxygen is the first thing looked for when looking for life on another planet. It only exists on Earth because of life. A person breathing for a day, if you're not working hard, if you're just kind of lazing around, creates enough carbon dioxide for 1 kilogram of plant matter to grow. So this is what the Earth's atmosphere is like. This is what the makeup is. 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. Remember, that was all created by plants. Carbon dioxide is only 0.04%. Plants have used up the carbon dioxide. Remember, 95% of the Earth's atmosphere was carbon dioxide before there were any plants. Plants have used up carbon dioxide to the point where it is now a trace gas. Before fossil fuel use, the only carbon dioxide for plants was that created by oxygen-breathing organisms and volcanic activity. Most plants cannot survive at less than 0.015% carbon dioxide, and they start dying off at 0.02%. Data suggests that it may have reached 0.018 during the last ice age. Before the Industrial Revolution, carbon dioxide levels were 0.028, or 280 parts per million. Today, they are 423 parts per million. So what happens to plants at higher carbon dioxide levels? So this image is a guy named Sherwood Itso, and he did studies of the effect of carbon dioxide on plant growth way back in the 80s. So that was before people had all this crazy alarmist stuff. So what happens? Increased photosynthesis. So so plants grow faster and with less stress and less water. Forests are growing faster. It stimulates growth of beneficial bacteria in both the soil and water. More plant growth means less erosion of topsoil, bigger crop yields, and more and bigger flowers. Less water loss, less irrigation, and more soil moisture. Increase in natural repellents to fight insect predators. So, I know, like, when I learned this stuff, I thought, okay, so come on, really? Increasing carbon dioxide has all those benefits to plants? Like, why do we keep hearing that it's a pollution? We hear that from our governments. We hear Trudeau says that it's a pollution all the time. So why do we hear that? Like, why are all these amazing improvements from plant health? It's because plants are starved of carbon dioxide. They evolved at much higher levels. This is what scientists believe. This is the best idea of what carbon dioxide levels were going back millions of years. And they came up with this record based on fossils. So this record only includes land-based plants because they actually looked at fossils of plants, because what happens with plants on the backside of plant leaves, there's something called stomata. Stomata are pores where the gas exchange happens, where carbon dioxide is absorbed and oxygen is let out. So that's how they came up with this graph. So this is an image of the Earth. It's based on satellite data looking at the difference between the Earth in 1982 and 2015. Over that period of time, the Earth gained 18 million square kilometers of leaf cover. That's equivalent to taking all the plants on continental United States, multiplying it by 2, so twice the number of plants in the continental United States, and adding that to the planet. Like, this is absolutely incredible. Like, why did I not know this? You can actually find this image on NASA's website. So it's not something that's completely hidden, but they talk about things like, okay, yeah, well, it's making plants grow faster, but that's more fuel for fires. So in 2016, scientists took a look at BC forests to try to determine how long would it take for the forest loss from the mountain pine beetle to come back. And the scientists determined, if you look at this study, they determined that all that forest that was lost, the 24 million hectares of forest that was lost during the mountain pine beetle devastation, would be back by around 2020. And the reason? Because rising levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are accelerating the growth of BC forests by 1 to 3% per year. And it makes sense. So if you look at ambient levels of carbon dioxide compared to 150 parts per million of carbon dioxide that Sherwood Itso did in his study, that tree is basically twice the size. And if you think about it, our Earth before the Industrial Revolution had about 280 parts per million of carbon dioxide. Today, it's 423 parts per million. The difference is 143 parts per million. That's close to the 150 parts per million that Sherwood Itso came up with in this study, that he studied, he tested for this. Isn't it like, when you think about it, trees in BC most likely grow twice as fast today than they did 200 years ago. Like, this is not, it's not just this little, oh, it's a little bit of an increase. This is like absolutely incredible. It's like more trees, more plants means more life for all of Earth. So here are some quotes. These are quotes from Sherwood Itso when he was doing these studies. And this, like I said, this is before the total climate alarmism was happening. He said, carbon dioxide effects on both the managed and unmanaged biosphere will be overwhelmingly positive, if not mind-boggling. Because he could see carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were going up, and they weren't slowing down. They were going to keep going up. We appear to be experiencing the initial stages of what could truly be called a rebirth of the biosphere. The beginnings of a biological rejuvenation that is without precedent in all of human history. So this image just shows a bunch of plants, a bunch of crops that the CO2 Coalition has looked at just to see what is the effect of increased carbon dioxide on the output, like how much harvests are increased. So carrots and turnips, 77% increase by increasing carbon dioxide levels by 300 parts per million. So again, the effects of carbon dioxide on plants. As carbon dioxide levels increase, plant growth rates increase. Carbon dioxide levels are higher now than they have been in 3 million years. So plants under similar light, temperature, and moisture grow faster today than they have in 3 million years. I know maybe I'm a little weird, but when I just stop and I think about that, every plant in the entire planet, on the other side of the world, those plants grow faster today than they have in 3 million years. If, who knows, maybe the scientists have it wrong. Maybe carbon dioxide levels were similar to ours sometime in the past. But right now they're faster than they have been in hundreds of years for sure. So plants lose less water through their leaves at higher carbon dioxide levels, which make them more drug resistant. Agricultural crops give 20% higher yields today than they would have had carbon dioxide not increased. More plants on Earth benefit all life. And this is amazing news. So, I've gone hog wild on the effects of carbon dioxide on the planet, but this sea level is one of the first things that I discovered. So a story about myself, my entire life, I tried to minimize my carbon footprint. And that's because I was told that. And because I've got a very scientific mind. I'm really good with physics. I understand that really well. I did in high school. I got the second place in the physics examination. I got a cash prize, and I bought myself an amplifier, and then ended up touring with a band for a year right after I graduated. So that's kind of who I am. So one of the things that I first discovered, I got restructured out of a job in 2019, December 2019, and I had time. And one of the things I could never figure out is how do they expect solar and wind to solve this problem? Because it's only windy some of the time, it's sunny only during the day. How do they expect that to happen? And so I started researching that, and I came across some other stuff. One of the first things I came across was sea level. So this is post-glacial sea level rise. So the sea level has been rising since the last ice age. It's risen 400 feet since the last ice age. And this is the image that really got me going. This is the sea level record from Victoria. They've been measuring the sea level in Victoria for 110 years. It was rising 0.76 millimeters a year back in 1910, and it's doing the same today. Everyone on Vancouver Island needs to understand this. We've been told that there's going to be catastrophic sea level rise for decades. There's been no change. It's amazing. So sea level measurements, keeping accurate sea level measurements is critical for maritime navigation. As a result, there are many sites with the measurements going back more than a century, including Victoria's. Sea level based on hourly measurements is a much more accurate indication of global climate than what we have with historical temperatures. Historical temperatures are recorded as daily highs and lows. The average is simply the average of this high and low. And the sites where they take the temperatures, a lot of times change geographically. Maybe more trees are planted, maybe there's concrete around them. So it's really hard to trust them, but sea level, the oceans are all connected. At sites, when I'm going to be showing you some graphs, they show different rise and fall rates. Some places the sea level is falling, some places the sea level is rising. And so what that actually indicates is the different rates that the land is rising and falling. That's why it's different. It's not because somehow it's not like you can't have a bathtub with water higher on one side than the other, right? So it's because land rising and fall rates. So this is an example of a place where the land is rising. Churchill, Manitoba. The sea level is falling there 9.21 millimeters a year, almost a centimeter a year. And that's because the glaciers had about 3 kilometers of ice there, and the glaciers are gone now, so the land is still rising. A place where the sea level is rising is where the land is falling, and this is in Louisiana, where they're doing lots of groundwater extraction, and as they take water out of the ground, it causes the land to fall. So if you look on the NOAA website, you'll find a place where it says the graphs give an indication of differing rates of vertical land motion, given that the absolute global sea level is believed to be 1.7 to 1.8 millimeters a year. So that's globally, if you look at all the land measurements, that's what you're getting, 1.7 to 1.8 millimeters a year. So I really think that back in 1988, James Hansen gave his testimony to the U.S. Congress. And he said that this increase in carbon dioxide is going to cause catastrophic global warming, and it's going to cause the sea levels to rise. And he was really worried about it. I believe that he really thought that that was going to happen, because if you look at some of the longest sea level records on Earth, you actually see a change in the sea level rise rates. So back around 1900, as you can see, this is Brest, France. It's the longest sea level record on Earth. And as you can see, it changed. It didn't change much. It went from 0 millimeters a year to I think it's about 1.1 millimeters a year. But it did change. Some other places, so this is another one, Cuxhaven in Germany. You can see again, there's a slight change around 1900, just before 1900. And this is in Liverpool. You can see the same thing. See, the sea level rate did change. So in 1895 is the last time the Thames River froze. So this is a picture of the Thames River. The image to the left is a photograph of the last time the Thames River froze. And the image to the right is a painting from before that, when the Thames River regularly froze. So I think that James Hansen really did believe. So this is James Hansen right now. That's actually a photo of him doing his Senate testimony in 1988. And after he gave that testimony, he was interviewed by Salon magazine, where he said, that the person that was interviewing him said, "So what do you think Manhattan's going to look like in 20 or 30 years? And James Hansen said that he believed that parts of Manhattan would be underwater. Well, they're not underwater. So this is the NOAA website, some of the sea level records. So you can go there, there's a map, and there's hundreds of places you can click on, and you can see what's happened to the sea level. Some of the locations in the US, they have what's called the Sea Level Trends tab. And if you click on that, if you would have clicked on that in October of 2021, you would have seen this image. And I thought, hey, look at their trends. It's not happening. The black line is what is the measurement. Those different colored lines are what they predicted. But as you can see, they're not. The sea level isn't accelerating the way that they said. So I thought, hey, that's great. So I took a screenshot, and it's a good thing I did, because this is what it looks like now when you go to that Sea Level Trends tab. They moved when they predicted this acceleration by 25 years. So these are the kind of models and the predictions that our governments are using. This is why these are the ideas why they have this lens. Why municipal governments are getting pushed to do this stuff to go for net zero. But these forecasts, they haven't happened in sea level. So this is a GIF. Let's see, is it working? Yes, it is. These are sea level records in BC. And as you can see, Campbell River, the sea level is falling 1.2 millimeters a year. Victoria, the sea level is rising 0.76 millimeters a year. Like, remember, that's 3 inches in a century. But there's if you look for it, Czech News put out a story, and they had an image of Campbell River, what they expected Campbell River to look like in the year 2100 with a meter of sea level rise. Campbell River, the sea level's falling. It's falling every year. This is the kind of stuff we're being told by our media, just to scare everybody. But it's anyway, blah blah. So because I'm interested about climate, on Facebook I get these feeds about climate, and I got this feed. It was from UBC, and it's their Coastal Adaptation Lab. And here's the thing that they were promoting, this article. It's time to accept, not resist rising sea levels. In this article, they said that sea level is expected to increase to 0.5 meter by 2050 and 1.2 meters by 2100. So this Coastal Adaptation Lab at UBC, their purpose was to work on public policies to deal with this sea level rise. This is a graph of Victoria sea level. So I've done tons of analysis of the Victoria sea level. I've downloaded hourly data, I've downloaded annual data, monthly data, and this is monthly sea level data plotted, and then I have the green line shows what would have to happen to get to 0.5 meter by 2050. The sea level rise rate would have to change from 0.76 millimeters a year to 16.1 millimeters a year. But that's the thing, this data only goes to 2020. Today is 2023. Yeah, I think it works out that they have to be 18.5 millimeters a year today to get, because that's 27 years. This is going to happen. It's kind of a very interesting story. There's something called the Robertson Lecture Series that's done by the University of Regina, and they did one back when I was really interested, like how do they expect to like stop carbon dioxide emissions with wind and solar? And they had this the seminar on small modular reactors. So the idea is you make a nuclear reactor in a factory and you ship the parts out rather than building everything on site because it's really expensive, and and so I went to this lecture, and the following year they had another lecture, and it was on the ecological effects of climate change. It was put on by somebody by UBC. Well, the guy's name is Cowichan, and it was great. So the first thing out of his mouth was that coral reefs were all being destroyed by climate change. And so they had a thing where you could put questions. I said, yeah, but the Great Barrier Reef has got more live coral now than it has in 40 years. And it was the first question asked, because there was somebody moderating the questions. The first question was asked was about that. So Cowichan, he didn't know how to answer it. He was like, it totally stumped him. That was the first question, so it was the first answer, and he didn't know how to answer it. So a week after the seminar, I also put questions in about sea level, but that question never got asked by the moderator. He sent me an email a week later, listen, about the coral reefs, and he sent me this fact check, a similar one that Facebook uses, and so I just said, I don't trust fact checks very much, because there's something that Facebook fact checked on me about sea level. And then I was able to get a conversation about why does UBC think that there's going to be 0.5 meter of sea level by 2050? Like, even with this fact check that he sent me said that sea level rise rates have accelerated from 0.3 millimeters a year in the 70s to over 3 millimeters per year today. And when I analyzed data, I can't find that. I thought, well, maybe if you looked at every sea level record on the Earth, you might be able to find that, but I couldn't find it. But even with that kind of acceleration, there's no way you're going to make 0.5 meter rise by 2050. And he said, we don't expect it to be from just gradual acceleration. We think it's going to be a catastrophic incident like an ice shelf collapse or Greenland, the ice shelf in Greenland. And so then I sent him data on the ice mass balance from Greenland. Greenland every year gains ice. So there's more ice falls in Greenland than melts every year, and that ice moves out and it calves off as icebergs. The ice mass balance in Greenland has not changed. It's the same as the average. It's not increasing or decreasing right now. And Antarctica had the coldest winters on record in 2021 and 2022. So I sent him this, and he just went, I don't know. He didn't say, I don't know. He said, gee, I'm not sure about this. And he forwarded my question to a sea level expert. This sea level expert never got back to me. And I've actually followed up with him. He won't get back to me. I've also brought up these exact same things with Elizabeth May at a town hall meeting with her. And she said, it's just the physics. You don't understand the physics. Let me tell you, I know this great scientist at the University of Toronto. He's a physicist. He's a genius. He can explain it all to you. You just don't understand it. And of course, she actually gave me his contact information. I wrote him, and he never got back to me. Like, how can you have to be, it's like believing in a doomsday cult, thinking that the sea level is going to just go up like that. There's just no way. 110 years of no acceleration. This is the reality of the measurements. So, just to be totally sure, I downloaded the data from Victoria, and I did a 1-year average of the monthly data. I did 5-year scented moving average. I did a 10-year scented moving average, and I did a 20-year scented moving average. Just to make sure, maybe there is some acceleration in that data. There's none, and there's no way it's going to rise 0.5 meter by 2050. So, I wrote to Metro Vancouver about this issue as well. How can you say this? And what do? They send me those kind of graphs with that acceleration. This is why we expect this. It's from these great scientists at NOAA and NASA and the Canadian Science Research and blah, blah. Yeah, but there's been no... So this is what they say for the different parts of BC. Prince Rupert, they expect 0.95 to 1.16 meters of sea level rise by 2100. Nanaimo, 0.8 meters. anyway, it's absolutely ludicrous that we are getting taxed more. We're getting wind farms. Think about the environmental devastation of a wind farm. Think about the environmental devastation of solar farms. It's ridiculous. This is what they're basing their things on. So this is the data that they sent me. Right? Yeah, come on, guys. So I downloaded, like I said, I also downloaded daily, I downloaded hourly sea level data. So I think there's 6,700 data points per year. Lots of data. I downloaded it, I did filters on it, and I just filtered out the high tides, because really, you only care about the high sea levels, right? Well, this is what I got. So these are monthly averages, monthly high tides. So the highest tide of every month. And I've also got the 48th month moving average. And as you can see, there's a cycle. So every 18.6 years, you get extreme tides. And guess what time of the year, guess what time of the cycle it is now? We're talking high tides. I don't know if you remember back in Souk, there's a tire shop that I think 3 times over a period of like 5 years, they got totally flooded out from high tides. Well, we're getting into that cycle now. So just wait. Instead of just saying it's high tides, I wonder if they're going to say it's climate change, right? So now I talk so much about sea level because you know what, sea level, like there's all these things that are so confusing in the science about these models and stuff, and it's kind of tough, right? And you hear all this crazy stuff. I think sea level is pretty solid. It's pretty black and white. But here's data on climate. So this, in the 1990 IPCC report, so this is out of an IPCC report, they show the 10,000 year sort of historical, and this is based on good data. If you get an encyclopedia from the 70s, you'll probably find a graph very similar to this. People have been looking at stuff to figure out what the climate is for a long time, and this is based on decades of data. And this is before they started getting all politicized. So it was warmer 6,000 years ago, and here's some evidence of that. This is a tree stump found 80 to 100 kilometers higher than where the nearest spruce forest is. And this tree stump, so right now, there's permafrost right there. Nothing grows there. No trees grow there. And in this tree stump, the tree rings are wider than they are in the forest that does exist south of this. So back in, if you look at this graph, see, it was colder before it was warmer there, right? So that means that this would have been permafrost and it would have melted for that tree to grow there. You know what? We keep getting told that with this permafrost melting is going to create this positive feedback, and it's going to cause total runaway climate change and warming, and it's going to destroy our planet. It's not going to happen. It's really not going to happen. So here's another one. So just also from the 1990 IPCC report, there's the medieval warm period. And as you can see, it shows that they believed it was warmer back then. In 1990, they thought the medieval warm period was significantly warmer than it is today. And here's some evidence of that. Greenland was settled by Vikings. It was an agricultural settlement. They grew barley there. They had herds of cattle. And they actually exhumed, they found barley from when they settled there. In 2012, they found barley there. You still can't grow barley in that part of, like in Greenland. I don't know if you can grow it at all in Greenland. So it was warmer then. So the idea that a little bit of warming, because in the 20th century the Earth has warmed a little bit, but the idea that this is an emergency is ridiculous. So this is, some people say, oh, well, the Vikings, that was just a local thing. That only happened in Northern Europe. The rest of the world did not have that warming, because you can't argue with barley found in Greenland. Well, this is a study that was done by Sebastian Luning, and he looked at 1,270 proxy studies. So what a proxy study means is that no one had a thermometer there and was recording the temperature. So you have to look at something else. You look at ice cores, you look at maybe sediment at the bottom of a lake, you look at tree rings. There's a bunch of different things that people look at to make an estimate of what the temperature was and climate. And so in this, he was comparing the medieval warm period to what the climate is like today. The markers marked in red show where it was warmer during the medieval warm period from all these studies. Where it's blue, it determined that it was colder during the medieval warm period. Green, it was wetter, and yellow, it was drier. So it was 88% of the studies found that it was warmer during the medieval warm period. It was warmer then. And you know, if you look at if you look at what happened in the world when it was warmer, life was better for everything. Everything was better when it was warmer. It's not good when it's cold. So here's again the IPCC graph from 1990, and then there's that little ice age. And if you look back to here, okay, I don't know, where is it? Yeah, this one, see the ice age? The little ice age was the coldest time in history since the actual ice age. It was really bad. So in this book, A Cultural History of Climate, it's full of examples where people suffered or flourished due to changing climate. It evaluates past climate based on everything, including agricultural records and letters to officials, not just proxy studies like many alarmists currently use. The hockey stick graph, I don't know if you're familiar with that, that's the one that the IPCC always used that showed that it was basically no change in the climate, just slight cooling, and then it just all of a sudden ratcheted up in the 20th century. That's a proxy study, but that's one, and they really manipulated the data. So in this book, there's a story about how in 1601, peasants of Chamonix turned to panic to the government of Savoy because the glacier known today as the Mer de Glace was growing larger and larger and had already engulfed 2 villages and was about to destroy a third. That is a climate emergency. That's from cooling. And the Earth warmed out of that before we started burning fossil fuels. What caused that warming? Why is it that our governments and the world wants to control our use of fossil fuels? As I've shown you, increasing carbon dioxide on Earth has made everything better. So this is an analysis of temperature records in the US. And so this is looking at how many stations in the US, and all the stations in this graph are still happening today. They were valid all through this entire period, so I'm not sure how many stations there were, but so it's not like stations showed up and then they're gone. So as you can see, many more stations in the 30s had temperatures over 100 degrees Celsius. Could you imagine if you had that kind of temperature right now? The media would be going crazy, but we're getting less days of 100, we're getting less stations reporting 100 degrees and more temperatures today. Climate-related deaths. So it's it's way down. And the main reason, it's not because of the climate, it's mainly because our technology, and we have fossil fuels to use the energy to make our lives better so we can protect ourselves from bad climate. There's always been bad climate. So this is the Great Barrier Reef graph. So the thing with coral reefs are basically calcium carbonate, and live coral builds the calcium carbonate, and sometimes those reefs have live coral in them, and sometimes they don't. And the more live coral there is on a reef, the more healthy it is. The Great Barrier Reef has more live coral now than it has been since they've been measuring it, and it's the most studied reef on Earth. So the idea, like when they tell you that it's threatening coral reefs, carbon dioxide increases, it's not based on anything. So this is the world's largest study of global climate-related mortality. 10 times as many people die from cold than die from warmth. So if our Earth does warm a little bit, it's not going to kill people. Now that there's all these forest fires, right? Well, this is the historical forest fire record in the U.S. going back to like the entire, I think it's all the way back to the beginning of the 1900s. In the 1930s, they had 5 times as much acres burned than they have today in the U.S. The thing about forests though is that there's a forestry in Canada. In the 80s, they stopped doing the prescribed burns. They stopped removing dead wood from forests to stop fires. They did that because the ecologists thought, oh, this isn't good. So we are going to get probably more intense fires because of that. So this is the forest. This is actually from the Canadian website. I just got this not too long ago, basically about a week ago. And as you can see, the number of fires is trending down, and the area burned is not really trending up. It's just kind of random. This is forest fires, global area burned by decade. So going by decade, the area of forest fires is going down. It's really going down. This is data regarding hurricanes in the U.S. And I mean, the trend since the 30s is going down, but really, there's nothing to be worried about. And this is one that I think is really interesting. So humans are really good at killing things. And back in the 1800s, we were killing lots of stuff really efficiently. And we kind of discovered that that's not so good. So these are the actual species that have gone extinct. It's from the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And they're the organization that will put out really scary things like, oh, there's like millions of threatened species on Earth. But if you dig into the data, this is the data on actual species that have gone extinct. The number of species going extinct keeps going down all the time. And the thing that's incredible is that, like, when you think about humpback whales around Vancouver Island, the first humpback whale seen at Vancouver Island for like decades was in 1997. I actually met the biologist who was working I think it's Banfield, the Banfield Research Station. She was there when they discovered the first humpback whale coming to Vancouver Island. Look at how many humpback whales we have now. There's tons of humpback whales. It's incredible. Same with sea otters. We humans, when we become prosperous because of energy, it's all because of energy. Because instead of having one person with a shovel digging a little hoeing a little bit to grow things, you can have 100-foot wide cultivator cultivating. It's incredible. It's all because of energy that we're prosperous and we're able to do these things, and we can care about the planet. We can care about the planet. So this is annual CO2 emissions. You can go to Our World in Data and find this, and it's great. There's lots of great data there. So this is annual CO2 emissions worldwide. And this, you can also find this, the share of the population living in extreme poverty in the world. And if you graph the data, both of those data keep together, but then switch this graph around so that it's showing how many people not in extreme poverty, you get this. They correlate exactly. And it's not a coincidence. China removed 600 million people from extreme poverty in the last 30 years. And that's because they've been building a coal-fired power plant every week for the last 30 years. They've got 200 coal-fired power plants under construction right now. So I've been to Haiti 4 times. This is what you have to cook like. This is how you cook when you don't have access to energy. 3.5 million people die early every year from indoor air pollution. Currently, there's still between $1 and $2 billion annual market for dried animal dung in India. These people are poor. We need to get them energy. So this is a graph of people in extreme poverty worldwide, and as you can see, East Asia and Pacific, it's almost been eliminated, and that's because of fossil fuels. Africa, unfortunately, they haven't developed much. This is what Haiti looks like. This is another picture from Haiti. This is what happens when you're impoverished. You can't put any energy and effort into cleaning things up. You just care about survival. We need to help these poor countries. We shouldn't be stifling their development and not allowing them to have fossil fuels. These are banks that have banned lending for coal power. Lots of them. And these are the years when they banned them. And here are some repercussions that I looked up just recently. So, Japan stopped their supporting of financing in Indonesia and Bangladesh for coal plants. South Africa, major banks pulling out of funding coal-fired plants due to environmental and social concerns. And China's coal pledge, they pulled their financing in, Where are they? Zimbabwe and Kenya. Those coal-fired power plants got canceled. And it's because of these ESGs, environmental, social, government scores, that these banks don't want to look bad at. So this is another graph from Our World in Data. This is carbon dioxide emissions by region. So I downloaded the data from this, and I made this graph. So this is China and India carbon dioxide emissions, and it's Canada's carbon dioxide emissions. In 9 months, in 2021, China and India together increased their carbon dioxide emissions equivalent to 100% of Canada's. So we could stop, we could get somebody could take away the keys to your car, turn off the electricity everywhere in Canada, make you live in a tent, and in 9 months, China and India would increase theirs. It's complete madness that our government calls carbon dioxide a pollution and that they want us to go net zero. So this is, so I learned the stuff about carbon dioxide and climate, and I was shocked. I thought, well, and the thing that's so funny, so I learned all this stuff, and I was putting stuff on Facebook about it, and my brother was getting really annoyed at me. He goes, Dave, why are you putting this on Facebook? What's that going to do, right? You're just annoying people. And I thought, you know what, he's right. I got to do something. So I did research. I looked at the Conservative Party, the National Conservative Party, and they said, yeah, no, we think there's a climate emergency. They made it an official public government policy, that their party policy, yeah, they're going to fight the climate emergency. And then the only one was Maxime Bernier. So, well, okay, I'll see if I can help with them. And no one was running in my riding, and Elizabeth May was the person that I was going against. So here's a video. Here's a snippet of a video of a debate I had with her.
I would do what I've been arguing for in Parliament for years now. Treating the climate emergency like an emergency means structuring something like a wartime cabinet. You need to take every party in the House in the same room and work on it together. We need to do what the Biden administration has done, which is recognize the climate crisis can't be treated as an issue for the Minister of Environment alone. It needs to be seen as a national security issue with a whole of government response, and then you get serious.
So, remember I told you about that testimony that James Hansen had at the US government in 1988. Well, the first climate-related agency was created as a result of that testimony. In 1989, they created the first climate-related agency, and they had $130 million in funding. So this is funding, this is a graph of the funding in the US going from 1989 to 2009. So it was over $7 billion in 2009. This is what it did after that, for a few years to 2017. Today, they've kind of gone crazy on this climate thing. Climate funding in the US is now around $16 billion. So let's see if this one works. This is a good example of.
Branson is pledging future profits from his airline to the tune of perhaps $3 billion. $3 billion, that's with a B, to fight global warming.
Is Al Gore a prophet? I just spelled profit.
Hilarious. And here's another video that shows, kind of gives you what kind of everyone's up against here. Here's a reason why you never hear about this stuff.
You know, we partnered with Google, for example. If you Google climate change, you will, at the top of your search, you will get all kinds of UN resources. we started this partnership when we were shocked to see that when we Googled climate change, we were getting incredibly distorted information right at the top. So we're becoming much more proactive. We own the science, and we think that the world, should know it, and the platforms themselves also do. But again, it's a huge challenge that I think all sectors of society need to be very active in.
Okay, so Jeff Curry from Goldman Sachs in October 2022 was interviewed, and he said that at the end of last year, fossil fuels represented 81% of energy consumption. 10 years ago, they were 82%. To do that, $3.8 trillion was spent worldwide on wind and solar. That's crazy. $3.8 trillion. So here's a good one. So this is, I discovered that there is something called the Burrard Station. It's a power plant. It's a natural gas power plant in BC. It's in Coquitlam. And so I'm just going to give you this example of two options to provide BC with 950 megawatts of power. So you could use 1.5 megawatt wind turbines. And the reason that I use that is because the Saskatchewan government there was a website I was researching what Saskatchewan looking at with this stuff. And they tried to figure out, okay, so what does it take to put up 1.5 megawatt wind turbines? So first, I guess, the average output of land-based wind turbines in Europe, so this is the average on land-based wind turbines in Europe, is 17%. So 950 megawatts divided by 0.17 is 5588 megawatts. Because, if you want to get an average of 950 megawatts, you'd have to do that. So the Saskatchewan government estimates that each 1.5 megawatt wind turbine requires 52 hectares of land. And that includes the space around each turbine, roads for maintenance, and transmission lines. The total land needed is 193,700 hectares. Okay, the other thing you could do is you could just put this natural gas power plant back online. This thing it's not being used right now. It's decommissioned when the Mica Dam expansion went online. It uses 78 hectares. It's not completely an apples to apples thing because I'm not looking at the mining for the extraction for the natural gas, how much land is used for that. But it also doesn't look at the extraction for the concrete, the steel. Each wind turbine uses about 2,000 tons of concrete and 500 tons of steel. It's crazy. So the realities of wind and solar is that the power is only available when the wind blows and the sun shines. Reliable power systems need to be there when there is no wind or sun. Adding wind and solar to an electricity grid is just adding unnecessary junk to our planet. You still need the reliable energy when it's not windy and it's not sunny. So you're adding all this crap to our planet. And it's the environmentalists that are pushing for this. It's wrong. It's so wrong. So this is the U.S. has 37,000 wind turbines in the U.S. I mean, I know it's weird. This sounds kind of melodramatic, but it really breaks my heart. It's crazy. Look at all that junk. These images. This is nice. This is good for our environment. That really, think about it. Think you wouldn't have to have that stuff because you still need the other energy there as well. This is an offshore wind farm output. So offshore, it's better because you have higher average energy, right? But you still get these periods where there's not enough for anything. So you can't have storage for that. There's no way. You can't have storage for that. The amount of batteries would be insane. So solar farms, look at that. Look at that. Just think about it. Stop. People, I wish our world, our people in this country, in the world would just look at that and think about what that is. That doesn't have to have that crap. Same with that. And that's in China. Those hills don't have to be covered in that junk. So, carbon dioxide. The process of increasing it brings people out of poverty. Increasing it in our atmosphere is beneficial to life. And there is no climate emergency. And that's it. That's my thing. If anyone has questions, please ask them.
climate change. The apocalypse apparently is nigh, flooding, heat waves, fire. Mother Nature is striking with vengeance. Doomsdayers tell us constantly that we're reaching the point of no return. The UNHCR claims there are 20 million displaced people a year owing to climate change and extreme weather. And Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, who are meeting this month in Davos, in his book, The Great Narrative, tries to build a whole moral and values framework on the shared belief that climate disaster is upon us.
And you just think, how is this not the top headline all over the Western world? This is easily one of the biggest developments of the year, if not the past 30 years. And it just slipped out with virtually no one grasping its true implications. Last night, the unelected totalitarian EU just announced the world's first direct carbon tax on individuals. How is everyone not freaking out over this? EU approves CO2 tax on heating and transport. The new carbon price will apply to petrol, diesel and heating fuels such as natural gas. Beginning in 2027, they're going to start adding on carbon tax whenever you pay your heating bill or fill up at the pump. The new scheme will entail higher prices at the pump, up to 10.5 cents for a litre of petrol and 12 cents for diesel, according to a study by the Potsdam Institute for Climate Research. Heating fuels like gas, heating oil and coal will see their prices increase as well. AFP confirms the agreement also aims to make households pay for emissions linked to fuel and gas heating from 2027. Of course, they'll start off small to get everyone used to it. Oh, just a tiny bit extra to save the planet. Then it's the slippery slope to an enviro-feudal hellscape. They're also imposing more of this on industries and energy companies, which will then just pass their costs on to the consumer. Let's not forget that man-made climate change is the biggest racket ever known. The climate has always changed, long before man even dreamt of inventing the internal combustion engine. Arctic summer sea ice stopped declining a decade ago. There's just been a massive increase in the Greenland Arctic ice sheet. The South Pole just recorded its lowest ever November temperatures. New evidence revealed that temperatures in the US over the last 50 years were exaggerated by up to 50%. Every time they browbeat us about record high temperatures, turns out they were recorded on the tarmac at major airports. Climate models claiming evidence of rapid global warming are routinely proven to be grossly exaggerated. But it doesn't matter. It's not about the science. It's never been about the science. It's about power, money, and control. They have to ram through this carbon tax now, because despite all the propaganda, all the social engineering, a new global poll just found that climate change skepticism is actually increasing. It's all one massive scam.
And so what's normal for climate? This is Phanerozoic. Phanerozoic is what you live in today. That's the period when you have like complex critters. We are here at 0 in the Neogene. Go back a 500 million years. And the first thing you see is that it is about as cold right now as it has ever been in the last 500 million years. We are actually in an extraordinarily cold period. We are in an ice age today. We're in a relatively warm period of an extremely cold period. You know, I didn't say this was going to be easy. This is, you know, reality is just, I'm not going to sugarcoat reality. This is reality. And so we are very cold. Back during the Cretaceous, the K means Cretaceous, scientists don't spell well. It was extremely hot. But average for Earth is a lot hotter than it is today. But what you should take away from this slide is that there's nothing normal about climate. Climate varies a lot. And it varies a lot for very good reasons, which we can figure out.
I think, according to the climate scientists around the world, and certainly the cutting edge scientists that we need to rely on here in the US, we've got to get carbon neutral by 2050. And I'm very comfortable with that target, and I think that's the appropriate target.
By 2050.
Which is only 27 years. That is not a long time away.
And how much will that cost?
So the cost that I focus on even more is all the costs that are going to happen if we don't get our act together.
How much will it cost to get us carbon neutral?
It's going to cost trillions of dollars, and it'll cost tens of trillions of dollars if we don't get our act together.
How many trillions?
I don't have the estimate or the numbers in front of me. I've seen a variety of different estimates, but it's a large amount. Fundamentally transforming our energy economy is a big deal.
Tell me the estimates that you've seen.
I don't have those numbers right on hand.
So you're advocating that we become carbon neutral, but you don't know how much it's going to cost?
So there's an awful lot of estimates out there. It depends on technology improvement and other kinds of things.
You're the expert.
I know
with how much it's going to cost.
I know with the certainty of all the experts I've spoken about, it's cheaper to get our act together than it is to not get our act together on climate change.
Okay, then tell me the cost versus the cost that if we don't do it.
I think it's orders of magnitude different. If we
I
don't
know
get our
that,
act
but
together, it's
you don't have a cost. You want us to get there, but you can't tell the American taxpayer how much it's going to cost? Is that your testimony?
It's going to save us money, and there's a lot of jobs.
Well, how do we know if you don't know how much it's going to cost? Maybe I'm not being clear. If we spent $50 trillion to become carbon neutral by 2050 in the United States of America, how much is that going to reduce world temperatures?
This is a global problem, so we need to reduce our emissions, and we need to do everything we can.
How much, if we do our part, is it going to reduce world temperatures?
So we're 13% of global emissions.
You don't know, do you? You don't know, do you?
You can do the math. We need to.
You don't know, do you, Mr. Secretary?
So we're 13% of global emissions.
If you know, why won't you tell me?
If we went to zero, that would be 13%.
You don't know, do you? You just want us to spend $50 trillion, and you don't have the slightest idea whether it's going to reduce world temperatures.
Now, so 94% of our transportation fuels are from petroleum. So we will be using petroleum for a long time for that. And we need to recognize that fact and deal with it, not come up with fantasies about other kinds of energy. And then, just the same way, this is from the International Energy Agency, right? So what's even better than the U.S. government would be an international agency. So this clearly could be in a school report. This is from 1980 to 2020, so projections. This is fossil fuels in the black. And this green bit is non-fossil sources. So all energy use, fossil. You can see virtually all of our energy is fossil fuels, and there's this sort of slowly growing band of non-fossil. All right, so let's break down the non-fossil. Non-fossil turns out to be almost entirely nuclear, hydro, and biomass, i.e. burning wood and things like that, right? So again, we're projecting some growth, and this is the wind and solar. Now break that down, and here's what wind and solar looks like. And we're about here, right? Getting ready for this big takeoff. And so in the future, it's going to grow really fast. It's not growing really fast now, but it's pretty soon. It's going to grow really fast, right? And when it does grow really fast, it gets really big. So if you just look at this one, you say, wow, it's getting really big. That's a tiny piece. That's this little teeny piece of this little teeny piece, right? It's just not going to be making a substantial contribution to world energy needs. This is the best graph ever. I didn't make it. Another economist did. So we're starting at 1000 BC, going up to now. And this line here is the per capita income of the world's population, all right? And it's set at 1 is the standard of living in 1800. And the point is that from 1000 BC to 1800, it doesn't change much. From 1000 BC, from the earliest dates we have records, to 1800, everybody in the world lived awful lives. They were all poor. You could be a king, you might be a little above the line. You could be a peasant, you're a little below the line. Everybody lived at a very sustainable level because it was just enough food that you replaced the population. Right? So if the population got a little bit bigger, people had to die off or you had to eat less. And eventually when you start eating less, you die off. So we all stayed pretty much there. Around 1800, in Britain and the Netherlands first, and gradually elsewhere, something amazing happened, which we call the Industrial Revolution. And for the developed world, we went up like this, to the point where today we have 16 times the material well-being in the industrialized world that everybody in the world had in 1800.
It's unconscionable right now that we're basically telling the poor world, look, we got rich on fossil fuels, it was great for us, but I'm sorry, there's not space for you, so you just got to stay poor and get used to it.
How did Ehrlich become famous? He became famous through the 1968 book, The Population Bomb, where he's telling human beings not, hey, the planet is going to become more impacted and that's intrinsically bad. He's saying you're all going to starve. And his close colleague, Sean Holdren, who was Obama's chief science advisor, he predicted in the 80s that we'd have up to 1 billion climate-related disaster deaths from famine by 2020, which has come and gone, and the world is better fed than ever. So what I find is that people who, I think internally, they don't really care about human flourishing, and they're really optimizing for eliminating our impact as much as possible, but they appeal to human flourishing to win over converts. Because if they really said the best possible Earth is the one that would exist had we never existed, and our goal is to eliminate as much human impact as possible as an end in itself, they would not win many converts. All their policies make sense because their policies are really aimed at making human life worse and ultimately reducing the human population. So it is true, you can say, well, yeah, aren't you cutting down more trees? Aren't you doing this? But they would say, well, if you use, let's say we had cheap, free nuclear energy, which they've actually commented on hypothetically when they thought fusion was possible. I talk about this in Moral Case and in Fossil Future. The leading environmentalists said this would be the worst thing ever. A totally clean, cheap, abundant source of energy would be the worst thing ever because of what we would do with it. And one of the leaders called it like giving an idiot child a machine gun. And what they recognized is that energy is really our ability to do work, which means our ability to impact the Earth. And when we use a lot of energy, we impact the Earth a lot. Now, we impact it in a way that's beneficial to us, including we preserve the most valuable parts of nature, and we give ourselves an ability to enjoy nature. Nevertheless, it is a very humanized Earth, and to the anti-human environmental movement, that is offensive. So that movement is not about a clean environment for us or for us to be able to contemplate polar bears or go on safaris or any of this. It's about a dehumanized Earth. It's the belief that we are uniquely bad and we need to get eliminated.
Protesters who get out there and they're demanding green jobs and no coal and climate justice and so forth have a very narrow, one-sided view of the issues. And what we need to respond to that with is context and look at the facts and look at the trade-offs that we're making and debate those trade-offs. This is a graph of emission standards for volatile organic compounds from vehicles, from cars and trucks, right? And so this is 1965 when the first standards were put in, and this is 2010. You'll see that this line is essentially approaching zero. And that, you could draw the same graph for every one of the major pollutants that EPA regulates. In every case, we cannot make the internal combustion engine any cleaner.
Unapata watoto wanakuwa akupata. Banalala paka vile na njala.
Mama Natalie and her family are artisanal miners, workers who extract the metal by hand in illegal or semi-regulated sites. These miners produce up to 30% of the Congo's cobalt. Every day, before the security guards arrive, they climb the embankments of this Chinese-owned mine and join hundreds of other families in search of cobalt.